everybody. Mark Levin here. Here's our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. Lots to cover. Most of you have heard by now of this horrific rape in a high school in a liberal Democrat county, a bedroom community outside of Washington, D.C. in Maryland by the name of Montgomery County. And it's a horrible, horrible story. Fox News reports new, brutal details emerged Monday in the alleged rape of a 14-year-old girl at a Maryland high school by two male students, at least one of whom was in the country illegally. The unidentified student at Rockville High School in Rockville, Maryland, 14 years old, was violently raped, sodomized, made to perform oral sex in a campus bathroom stall by the two males, according to court records. Jose Montano, 17, from El Salvador, Henry Sanchez Milan, 18, from Guatemala, were charged with first-degree rape and 2 counts of first-degree sexual offense after they allegedly attacked the girl at 9 a.m. last Thursday. The Montgomery County Police in a statement said the victim was walking in a school hallway when she met 2 male students identified as Montano and Sanchez. Montano asked the victim to walk with him, and Montano asked the victim to engage in sexual intercourse. She refused. Montano asked the victim again and then forced her into a boys' bathroom and then into a stall. Montano and Sanchez both raped the victim inside the bathroom stall. They raped her multiple times, vaginally, orally, sodomized her. They spoke to each other in Spanish. Blood and male fluids were recovered from the scene by a forensic expert, according to court records. And it goes on. And it goes on. People ask, what can we do about this? How can this happen? An 18 and a 19-year-old? These are men. 17 and 18-year-old. In the school with the 14-year-old? I want to give you a little bit of history, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to tell you how we got here. There was a decision. This is in Men in Black, an entire chapter on immigration. This book was really before its time. A truly great exposition of what the court has done in so many areas. The 1982 Plyler versus Doe decision. I'm reading from it. This book is more than 10 years old. Is perhaps the most egregious of the court's immigration rulings. In the 1960s and 70s, a rising tide of illegal immigrants crossed the border from Mexico into Texas to take advantage of the better economic climate and quality of life in the United States. By 1975, the financial strain of the influx had started to choke the already crowded school systems in Texas border towns. In response, Texas enacted a new law concerning children not legally admitted to the United States that allowed local school districts to deny their enrollment and withheld from local school districts state funds to educate these children. Numerous lawsuits were brought on behalf of several children challenging the new law, which were consolidated called Plyler, P-L-Y-L-E-R versus Doe. In a 5-4 decision in 1982, Justice William Brennan, writing for the majority, went so far as to extend the term person in the 14th Amendment to include illegal aliens by virtue of their physical presence in the United States. Moreover, Brennan found that the children of illegal immigrants weren't responsible for their illegal entry into the country. Therefore, quote, legislation directing the onus of a parent's misconduct against his children does not comport with fundamental conceptions of justice, unquote. Now, while the court recognized that there's no constitutionally enumerated right to a free public education, Brennan said in part in his decision, neither is a public education merely some governmental benefit indistinguishable from other forms of social welfare legislation. Both the importance of education in maintaining our basic institutions and the lasting impact of its deprivation on the life of the child mark the distinction. The American people have always regarded education and the acquisition of knowledge as matters of supreme importance. We've recognized the public schools as a most vital civic institution for the preservation of a democratic system of government, and these historic perceptions of the public schools as inculcating fundamental values necessary to the maintenance of a democratic political system have been confirmed by the observations of social scientists. But Brennan wasn't done. When he moved to the question of whether the Equal Protection Clause applied to extending social benefits to illegal aliens, he determined that because Texas had essentially delineated illegal aliens as a distinct class of people, they must be treated equally with every other person in the state. Not to do so in this instance, the provision of free public education, he said, would violate the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. So in Plyler, the court decided that any conglomeration of people, regardless of the reason for their classification under law, had to be treated identically with every other class of people. Brennan also said that irrespective of the financial burden imposed on the community or the state by illegal aliens, the cost was not sufficient to justify preventing illegal immigrants from availing themselves of a free public education. Well, the minority opinion was written by Chief Justice Warren Burger, and I might add, Justice Byron White, appointed by John Kennedy, and Rehnquist, appointed by Nixon, later Chief Justice under Reagan. He wrote on their behalf saying this: "This court makes no attempt to disguise that it is acting to make up for Congress's quote-unquote lack of effective leadership and the serious national problems caused by the influx of uncountable millions of illegal aliens across our borders. The failure of enforcement of the immigration laws over more than a decade and the inherent difficulty and expense of sealing our vast border have combined to create a grave socioeconomic dilemma. It is a dilemma that has not yet been fully assessed, let alone addressed. However, it is not the function of the judiciary to provide quote-unquote effective leadership simply because the political branches of government fail to do so." And now you know. The Supreme Court has also reached into other areas to find rights for immigrants that the Constitution, Congress, and the executive branch never intended. In 1973, the case called Griffiths, the court ruled that a state could not deny non-citizens the right to take the bar exam and become licensed, practicing attorneys. Again, thanks to the hidden meaning found in the Equal Protection Clause. In 1977, in Nyquist versus Marklet, the court ruled, again, 5-4, that it was unconstitutional for New York to require resident aliens to at least apply for U.S. citizenship before becoming eligible for financial aid for education. And there's more. The court, in a number of cases over the last 5 decades, has determined not only that aliens, even illegal aliens, are persons as defined in the 5th and 14th Amendments, but also that their status is increasingly indistinguishable from that of citizens. So while the Constitution specifically gives Congress the sole authority to determine how many immigrants may enter the country, how immigrants may become citizens, and whether those immigrants should be able to avail themselves of benefits of U.S. citizenship, the Supreme Court has chosen on many occasions now to ignore the express direction of the founders and usurp the authority for itself. In 1969, this case started a lot of it, Graham versus Richardson. Harry Blackmun. He wrote, "We agree with the 3-judge court in Pennsylvania that the justification of limiting expenses," this is a welfare case, "is particularly inappropriate and unreasonable when the discriminated class consists of aliens." You had states that wanted to limit welfare only to citizens or legal immigrants. The Supreme Court said no. In 1976, the Supreme Court ruled in Hampton versus Mo Sun Wong that citizenship was an unconstitutional requisite to holding a government job. In Sugarman versus Dugall, New York Civil Service case, 1973, the court found that while states could indeed differentiate between citizens and non-citizens in certain types of jobs, those jobs had to be very narrowly defined and limited specifically to the function of the government, such as law enforcement and senior policy-making positions. Citizenship was not a material requirement for other civil service positions, so requiring it for those positions violated an immigrant's 14th Amendment rights. The court has nationalized the issue of immigration. It's nationalized the issue of immigration. It has taken it away from Congress. Really began in 1969, some cases even before that, but that's the harbinger. And the 1982 case of Plyler versus Doe, that was the nail in the coffin of Congress's plenary role on the matter of immigration. Free schooling, welfare benefits, in-state tuition. I want to move on to some of this, the hearing with Gorsuch, the nominee, Senator Dianne Franken-Feinstein. This one touches our hearts here at Levin Radio, and you too, I'm sure. I want you to listen. They're so out of control, the left, but there's a bigger point here. Cut 14, go.
Judge Gorsuch has also stated that he believes judges should look to the original public meaning of the Constitution when they decide what a provision of the Constitution means. This is personal, but I find this originalist judicial philosophy to be really troubling. In essence, it means that judges and courts should evaluate our constitutional rights and privileges as they were understood in 1789. However, to do so would not only ignore the intent of the framers, that the Constitution would be a framework on which to build, but it severely limits the genius of what our Constitution upholds. I firmly believe the American Constitution is a living document intended to evolve as our country evolves.
Ladies and gentlemen, this gets to the heart of the matter. That which stands between us and a centralized government, a tyrannical government, is our Constitution. The Constitution is the governing mechanism of your unalienable rights when you read the Declaration of Independence. The issue of unalienable rights didn't begin and end with the Constitution. It didn't begin and end with the American Revolution. It didn't begin and end with America. This notion of natural law, that you have rights that are eternal, that there are truths that are eternal, that there are things bigger than man and bigger than women, that there are principles that are right and actions that are wrong, that they can be intuited, they can be reasoned, they can be part of faith, they can be part of science, they can be part of knowledge. The point is this. The purpose of the Constitution is to defend the individual and his or her liberty, and yet create a government that nurtures it. It's not up to the government to be the biggest and most vibrant entity it can be. It's up to you and me. We're supposed to be all we can be, not the government. This idea of a living and breathing Constitution, as I've written about before, is one of the central themes, living and breathing Constitution, of progressivism. It's a phrase, if not invented by, but certainly promoted most aggressively by Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson spoke of the federal government as a human body with different organs. And he argued, before he became president, he argued that you can't have a body with one organ fighting the other organ, one organ checking and balancing against the other. They have to work in harmony. It's a living and breathing human being, and so he transfers that or projects that onto government. And whenever you hear somebody say we need a living and breathing Constitution, they are anti-Constitution. Because for the left, the progressive left, they're statists. That which stands in their way, the obstacles that stand in their way, are found in the Constitution. Separation of powers. You have to amend the Constitution to change these sorts of things. And they support an iron-fisted, centralized government. More particularly, they support this massive, ubiquitous administrative state that they've created. because it gets around this naughty little problem of we the people, where they can impose their social engineering plans, their radical egalitarianism, and do all those things which the Constitution protects us from. Remember, the purpose of the Constitution is to create a just governing environment that nurtures individual liberty, doesn't suffocate it, that undergirds the civil society, doesn't devour it. Those framers of our Constitution brought us the very liberty that we enjoy today, and that's under attack today. They were imperfect men. They knew they were imperfect men. They tried to address the issue of slavery, but others among them fought against them. And they knew that nonetheless they would try and create a constitutional system that does not enshrine slavery, but that creates an environment, a legal, a governing environment, that makes it possible for their children and grandchildren to throw it off. These are not my words. They are, I paraphrase, the words of Abraham Lincoln. Of Abraham Lincoln, a much greater statesman than Dianne Feinstein can ever dream to be. What is it about the left that has to continue to trash our history? What is it about the left that has to continue to trash our revered documents? A living and breathing Constitution is not a Constitution at all. Living and breathing. Each individual is to be all they can be. The government's not to be all it can be. How many more human experiments must there be throughout the world, throughout the history of mankind, to prove the point? How many more? When you go in front of a judge, I don't care if it's a local judge, if it's a state judge, a federal judge, or a Supreme Court justice. You want them to apply the law and the Constitution to the facts, to the case and the controversy. Not to apply a living and breathing ideology that always, by the way, manages to empower the federal government and weaken the individual. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? The level of constitutional illiteracy, the level of complete ignorance when you hear somebody like Dianne Feinstein is contemptible. She's a United States Senator. But this is the progressive mentality when it comes to the media, when it comes to academia and education, when it comes to senators and congressmen, when it comes to presidents for the most part, when it comes to the bureaucracy. There's no understanding of Americanism. That's why I wrote this book, Rediscovering Americanism. These principles, these eternal principles, these universal principles, they weren't invented by the framers of the Constitution. They weren't invented by the founders. They reasoned them. They discerned them. They were well read. They studied history. They understood Socrates and Plato. Most of all, they understood Aristotle. They understood Cicero. They tell us who they understood. They tell us where their thoughts came from. The greatest minds and experiences in the history of humankind. It's very alluring to people who don't understand the context of any of this or the American heritage for them to say, I believe that the Constitution should change with the times. Really? So should a governing document in Germany have changed with the times when Hitler came to power? I'm just giving extreme examples. Should the Constitution, if they had one at the time in China, have changed with the times when Mao came to power? When Stalin came to power and so forth? No. If you have a living and breathing Constitution, you have tyranny. Because then those who have power will do whatever those who have power want to do. Look at the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights exists to control Dianne Feinstein and to protect you. To protect you. So you and I, we're concerned about living and breathing individual human beings. They're concerned about a living and breathing government. A living and breathing government that chokes the life out of living and breathing individuals. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
I watched a lot of this House Intelligence Committee hearing. We're going to spend a lot of time on this, and I went through a lot of the Gorsuch hearing today, too, and we're going to spend a lot of time on that. But I'm going to tell you something as I watch this House Intelligence Committee hearing. I just realize how completely pointless so much of this is. Completely useless. Even the issue that the media and so many commentators, including on Fox, focused on during the course of and after the hearings was just, it flabbergasted me. It flabbergasted me. We have gone from media reports all but condemning, I'll call it the Trump world for lack of a better term, the Trump world for colluding with the Russians during the course of the campaign to, can I prove that Trump world colluded with the Russians during the campaign, even though I never alleged that. I'm citing news articles. To today, Trump world is under investigation by the FBI. We've gone from, I don't know. Radio. There's one piece up at National View online trashing the Freedom Caucus and conservatives. Now, of course, if people knew the backstory that some of these hosts have been working closely with Kevin McCarthy and Paul Ryan and so forth, and briefings and talking points, they would be appalled. But it's not my role to expose everybody. But I just want to educate these fellows who've been around a long time, claim to be conservatives of one sort or another, commonsensical type people. It's not about purity. It's about integrity. Integrity. As my friend Robert Eno wrote a Conservative Review, these politicians made a promise, election cycle after election cycle. They lied. They lied to the American people. They lied to the Tea Party. They lied to conservatives. They lied to Republicans. They lied to the voters. That is the bottom line. They say one thing and they do quite another. And then they try and wrap it up in their old rhetoric, and it doesn't match up. You can't ram through a new massive government spending bill, calling it repeal, in 18 days, and then start trashing conservatives who say, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this thing, and it's not going to work. I really believe, ladies and gentlemen, that we have abandoned the principles and the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, which are older than the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, I might add. We've abandoned them. We're all now statist progressives. That's pretty much what we are. The administration says we're going to have $1 trillion infrastructure bill. The Rockettes and the pom-pom guys are all out. And not just on radio, they're supported. Yes, that's what we're going to do. When Obama proposed it, we opposed it. This is about integrity and virtue. I played for you a couple of times last night on radio and on Levin TV. Paul Ryan, his own words, 14 months ago, saying what they were going to do. And now he refuses to do it. Integrity, or the lack thereof. The lack of virtue. All we hear about now is we need to learn how to govern. We all need to get in line one behind the other and have victories. Victories for whom? Victories for what? Bigger government. Newt Gingrich yesterday going on and on about infrastructure. That needs to be the next thing. We need a Trump majority behind infrastructure. Well, count me out. I oppose the Obama majority behind infrastructure. Brett Hume trashing the Freedom Caucus. Donald Trump knew who to blame. It was the Freedom Caucus. Says squat about the moderates who wanted even more government. Not a thing. But, ladies and gentlemen, we knew this was what it was after the vote, and now I'm going to underscore it for you. I'm going to underscore it for you. John Cornyn, one of the Republican leaders, senior senator from Texas, I'm ashamed to say. John Cornyn says flatly, this is from the Associated Press, a tweet by Erica Werner, that health care will not be attempted again via reconciliation. Quote, it's clear it needs to be done on a bipartisan basis. That tells you Cornyn never supported abolishing Obamacare through reconciliation or any other way, because obviously the Democrats are not going to do that. So he was, is, and always has been a complete fraud, a liar. John Cornyn is a liar. Not to be outdone, Mitch McConnell, another fraud and a liar. The Associated Press, Erica Werner again. McConnell making clear Obamacare repeal efforts dead. Quote, we have the existing law in place, and we'll just have to see how that works out. Is this a leader? Why the hell is Mitch McConnell the leader of the Republicans in the Senate? Can somebody tell me what attributes he brings to this job? He's not articulate, unless you think a mumbling homeless person is articulate. He's not charismatic, unless you think a doorknob is charismatic. He's not particularly intelligent, unless you think a 71 IQ is up there. What is it that Mitch McConnell stands for? What is it that Mitch McConnell has ever done? Short of fighting McCain-Feingold, which he lost. What is it? His wife is safely ensconced at the Transportation Department, having been safely ensconced at the Labor Department under the prior Republican administration. Between both jobs, became a multimillionaire on a board, cashing out stock options. What is this? So they're already announcing in the Senate. Isn't it funny? We didn't hear peep from Mitch McConnell while this battle was going on in the House. We didn't hear peep from John Cornyn while this battle was going on in the House. You want to know why? Because they wanted it to fail. That's why. They were never going to do the heavy lifting through the budget reconciliation process. They were never going to do the heavy lifting with the parliamentarian or the vice president sitting as president of the Senate. Never, ever. And they just proved it. And the word's been put out to their mouthpieces in the media, in the print media, in the internet media, in the Fox media. Trash the 18 conservatives. Give us cover. Give us cover. Because in truth, we like Obamacare. We've abandoned our integrity if we ever had it. We've abandoned our virtue if we've ever had it. Just trash these people as purists, as naysayers. And that's what they're doing. That's what they always do. These old barnacles who hang around and hang around. They don't really believe in liberty. Liberty is a lot of work. Liberty is a lot of work. And they don't believe in it. I mean, good Lord, I wonder sometimes these people, not just these people, but even more of them. What do you think they would have said about the Revolutionary War? What do you think they would have said in Philadelphia at the Pennsylvania Assembly House, which we now call Independence Hall, when delegates met from the different states and a debate ensued on whether or not to declare independence, meaning an escalation of war with Britain? Britain was at war with us, but some of the states had hoped to avoid it. What do you think? These sunshine patriots, what do you think they would have said back then? What do you think they would have said about the Civil War with all the carnage and all the casualties? What do you think they would have said? We have a battle over a piece of legislation. A disastrous proposal to replace a disastrous law. And we trash the 18 patriots who have integrity and virtue. Still going on today. And now they advise Donald Trump, from the pathetic Wall Street Journal editorial page to certain pathetic mouthpieces on Fox to pathetic people who write on the internet, going on and on and on. Now it's time to reach out to the Democrats. Exactly. Because they like big spending. They like borrowing. They like big government, despite their propaganda to the contrary. This is a game to them. This is just a debating event to them. To you and to me, it's real life. It's not a game. I watch people on TV. They don't come to TV with particularly substantive backgrounds. They're not particularly knowledgeable about anything. Most of them have served politicians. They haven't accomplished much in terms of thinking or writing or academics or business or anything else. The same circle nerds go on and on telling us how we ought to live our lives, telling us who we ought to hate, telling us who we ought to like, telling us what's wrong with us. The issue is not purity. The issue is integrity. The issue is when you make a promise to the American people not once but 1,000 times, you're expected to honor it. I know politics is a little different than every other walk of life. You go into court, when you lie 1,000 times, you're held in contempt 1,000 times. You lie 1,000 times on a lie detector, well, you're going to face consequences. You lie 1,000 times on an SAT exam or a bar exam or a medical exam, there are consequences. You lie 1,000 times when you're interviewed by law enforcement, there are consequences. I want to congratulate the Freedom Caucus, the true constitutional conservatives, the true patriots, for stopping this disastrous bill from passing and its fraud being imposed on the American people. We need to seriously address our health care issues. I thought the president's comments today were actually superb, and he showed great humility, and we'll get to that later. This was bad legislation. They tried to rally support for it. Having failed, they then started to threaten people. Then they pulled the bill. That's not leadership. They had 7 years to prepare for this, to bring in the different quote-unquote factions, and to address the fundamental problems of Obamacare. I keep hearing Paul Ryan and his surrogates within the Republican leadership and his cronies within the Republican Party go on and on about it's time to govern. It's one thing to be in the opposition, but it's time to govern. I would say to the Speaker, to the House Majority Leader, to the House Majority Whip, you're pointing your fingers at yourselves. It is time to govern. And this isn't leadership. This is not leadership. You excluded the conservatives, and it's odd that we talk about the conservatives as 40 or 50 among 200 and some Republicans. You excluded the conservatives from the early stages of developing this, and now you're attacking them. As usual, the conservatives are at first ignored, and then they're attacked and blamed. We've been hearing all kinds of deceit and deceptions about health savings accounts, about Medicaid, about policy choices, about future costs, all lies. We were told so much couldn't be done through budget reconciliation. They never even asked the parliamentarian. We found that out the other day. And, of course, the Vice President of the United States is the ultimate parliamentarian under the relevant statute. And he's the President of the Senate under the Constitution. The problem, ladies and gentlemen, comes down to this. Many Republicans, including Republicans in the leadership, do not want to repeal big chunks of Obamacare. They do not want to do it, and they won't do it, including President Trump's choice for Secretary of HHS, Tom Price, who made it abundantly clear last weekend that we can't just repeal Obamacare. They voted 60 times to repeal Obamacare. They put a repeal bill on Obama's desk, but they refused to do it when they controlled both houses of Congress and the presidency. So 60 times it was a sham. The one time they put it on Obama's desk was a sham. A sham. We'll get into this. Now, as for the Democrats, the Democrats have destroyed our healthcare system. And they're cheering today because they want to keep it destroyed. A pretty sick collection of politicians, don't you think? They have destroyed our healthcare system. They have destroyed our insurance system. The greatest medical system on the face of the earth, which most people can't even afford anymore with insurance. That's why you get government out of things. Drives up costs and drives down care. This is who they are. They have been desperate to nationalize our health care, and they effectively had. My problem is Republicans want to go along with them. Even many of your neighbors who claim to be conservatives. If you tell them, this pre-existing condition, really, it shouldn't be a matter of national mandate by the federal government. The states can handle it. What are you talking about? Or, I know you have a kid who's 25 or 23 on your health care plan, but they really ought to be on their own health care plan. What are you talking about? I don't really think we should expand Medicaid. It's already broke to include people who are at 138% of the poverty level, not just the poverty level. We really can't afford it. Why, are you against poor people? And you'll hear this from conservatives, so-called. I saw one knucklehead on Fox start again to attack the insurance companies. You can attack the insurance companies and the drug companies and the doctors and the hospitals and the this and the that. The fact of the matter is, there was a time when you could buy affordable insurance. There was a time when doctors could actually spend time and give you care at a reasonable cost. We did have these things before we had massive centralized government and redistribution of wealth and all these self-appointed eggheads telling us who can get what, when, how, and where, and so forth. The Republican Party is lost. Rather than follow the conservatives, the Reaganites, the Tea Party types, rather than listen to really good proposals coming out of the Cato Institute and the Heritage Foundation and many other places, they decided to ram through something that is absolutely unsustainable and untenable financially and for you. And for you. They never could explain how your policy costs would go down. They never could explain how your deductions would go down. They never could explain how we were going to pay for all these massive subsidies to states. And, of course, the poor, who are never subsidized. But it's striking home. It's hurting people. We're people who even make decent incomes cannot afford their health care anymore since Obamacare. I guess it's 10 years now, maybe longer, I don't remember. Maybe shorter. But it was a long time ago when I wrote Liberty and Tyranny. Liberty and Tyranny, and the subtitle was A Conservative Manifesto. And under item 7, under the Conservative Manifesto, I wrote this: fight all efforts to nationalize the healthcare system. National health care is the mother of all entitlement programs, for through it, the statist controls not only the material wealth of the individual, but his physical well-being. Remind the people that politicians and bureaucrats, about whom they are already cynical, will ultimately have the final say over their choice of doctors, hospitals, and treatments, meaning the system will be politicized and bureaucratized. Remind them that this human experiment has been tried and has failed in places like Britain and Canada, where patients have been subjected to arbitrary treatment decisions, long waiting periods for life-saving surgeries, antiquated medical technologies, the denial of high-cost pharmaceuticals available elsewhere, and the inefficient rationing of health care generally. And remind them that despite past utopian promises, the statist rarely delivers. The statist rarely delivers. When I heard Tom Price over the weekend basically say, no, we cannot just repeal Obamacare. There's all these people we have to take care of. You know, we can't just leave them. We're humane. I thought to myself, he just gave it up. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been spending trillions and trillions of dollars on people who cannot afford, quote unquote, this, that, or the other thing. The main purpose today of the federal government is to redistribute wealth from those who make it to those who take it, whatever their circumstances. You and I, this is all we do. Tax day's coming. Our tax rates are enormous. And we keep paying for people we don't know, strangers who are poor. They keep changing the definition of poor. We keep paying for people who are here illegally. And we're told, suck it up. That's the way it goes. We see a central government out of control. We want somebody. We want a political party to make things right. Not all at once, not in every way, but just start. And they had the perfect opportunity to do it with Obamacare. The problem is, ladies and gentlemen, a big part of the Republican Party is progressive. That is, they're utopian statists. They call themselves moderates, and the media reports it. Oh, the moderates. They're not moderates. They're big government progressives. They didn't want any changes to Medicaid. Obama expanded it. They voted against it. Now they want it. Like a bunch of druggies. They talk a good game. They mean none of it. The problem, you see, with the Freedom Caucus and the patriots who make up that membership, and it ought to be all the Republicans, but clearly it's not, is they actually believe what they say. When they talk about free market economics, they mean it. When they talk about capitalism, they mean it. When they talk about more competition and opportunity, they mean it. And they know what stands in the way is government. And they were hell-bent against giving a rubber stamp to Rhino Care, repeal in name only. They were not going to give a rubber stamp to Obamacare Light. It would go against their own moral beliefs and their principles, and they were right. And they were attacked, and they're called names. Even now, whether you watch Fox or CNN or any of it, they bait. They bait the Republican leadership. They bait the surrogates and the cronies of the Republican leadership in Congress. What do you say to the Freedom Caucus? Do you think the Freedom Caucus screwed you? What do you say to them? What do you say to, what about them? What about them? They should be listening to them and listening to their ideas and begin the process, slowly but surely,
of explaining to the American people and persuading the American people that we have a completely different and better way, which starts with individual liberty and family and choice. That we want to get the government, liberals used to say this, out of your bedroom, out of your decision-making process. And the people may actually join us because they're sick of the red tape too. Instead, to hear the cheap shots, oh, you know, the insurance company, oh, big pharma, oh, you know, the doctor, has nothing to do with any of that. You want to punish the big insurance companies? Then unleash liberty, where there's more insurance companies. You want to punish big pharma? Then unleash liberty, where there's more pharmaceutical companies. Competition. Competition. This bill wasn't written for insurance companies. It wasn't written for big pharma. This bill was written by cowards. Cowards who were afraid that if they dared to touch what Obama had built in any significant way, that they'd lose at the ballot box. That the liberal media who hate us, who hate our Constitution, who despise our history, just like the Democrats on display at the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings for Neil Gorsuch, that they will turn on them and accuse them of opposing poor people. How many times do we hear? 14 million, 24 million people will be dropped from the rolls. 24 million people? No. 10, 9, 14 million, maybe. But if we had a vibrant, competitive insurance market, they would be able to purchase their own insurance at a much cheaper price. And they're going to be dropped anyway if Obamacare remains in place, because it's imploding, as everybody knew it would. And somehow the Democrats are responsible for nothing. The Obama administration and all of its abuse of intelligence gathering and so forth, it's not targeted. It's not under investigation like it should be. The Obama administration and the destruction of our health care system, it's not attacked. It doesn't get a tongue lashing. No. The conservatives who had nothing to do with it, the conservatives who actually want to fix this, they're attacked. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. These stories that we've been reading for months now, the New York Times, January 17, NSA gets more latitude to share intercepted communications. On January 3rd, it does. Or March 1, 2017, New York Times, Obama administration rushed to preserve intelligence of Russian election hacking. White House officials scrambled to spread information. They wanted to leave a clear trail of intelligence to government investigators. February 14, Trump campaign aides had repeated contacts with Russian intelligence, New York Times. I can go on and on. There's that. And then there's the bombshell from Chairman Nunes. And by the way, Chairman Nunes is under brutal attack, the way I was attacked for several weeks, because he's changed the narrative of the media and the Democrats. They're one and the same. The Praetorian Guard media protecting the Democrats and protecting the Obama administration. These surveillance activities, these transcription activities, these distribution activities, the leaking and so forth, that's on the hands of the Obama administration. I heard a troublesome interview with Jake Tapper this morning on my home station, WMAL, in Washington. And he was pathetic, rambling, saying Nunes really didn't have anything, really didn't explain himself clearly and so forth as he was being praised. That is Tapper. I'm going, what is this? This is pathetic. CNN is pathetic. And his comments were pathetic. In the Federalist,
Molly Hemingway succinctly says this: I want to be clear in terms of the surveillance that Nunes talked about. None of this surveillance was related to Russia or the investigation of Russian activities or of the Trump team. That is the Nunes information. Again, she writes, number one, information was collected on the Trump team by Obama administration agencies. Number two, this information had no reason to be shared in intelligence reports to Obama officials. Number three, Obama officials may have flouted legally required attempts to minimize and mask personal identifying information. Number four, this had nothing to do with Russia. This was the Obama administration, ladies and gentlemen. All the focus on Trump. Trump wasn't conducting, or his administration, surveillance activities on Democrats, on Hillary, on Obama. Trump's administration wasn't putting information about Obama and Hillary and so forth in intelligence reports, information that was gotten through incidental collection. And yet, look how it's turned around. Look how the Democrats and the media have turned it around. This is why they've been attacking me, and I can handle it. I don't mind it. These battles need to be fought. This is why they're going after Nunes. And as for Nunes, they say, well, he went to the White House, so he cannot be trusted, you see, to conduct this investigation into Russia and so forth. Ladies and gentlemen, what Nunes took to the White House had nothing to do with Russia, had nothing to do with the Russian investigation. A whistleblower, or more than one whistleblower, somewhere in the labyrinth of the intelligence agencies and law enforcement, brought him numerous intelligence reports where the President of the United States, his family, his transition team, they were revealed. And rather than purge that information, like the Obama administration was supposed to do, the Obama administration kept the information, transcribed it, put it in reports, and spread it around the federal government. You won't hear this on CNN or ABC or NBC or MSNBC or CBS. You won't read this in the New York Times or the Washington Post. This is the great issue. The Obama administration's activities when it comes to the politicization of intelligence activity and perhaps law enforcement activity. And it wouldn't be the first time. Ask the Prime Minister of Israel. Ask the Jewish groups that opposed the Iran deal. Ask the members of Congress, all of whom, through incidental communications, wound up having their names and their information put in intelligence reports. And much of that got back to the White House. This isn't some game. This isn't some joke. Now we're all supposed to trash Devin Nunes because the guy had the brass to get in front of a microphone not once but twice and go down to the White House and say, Mr. President, I want you to know what your branch of the government is up to. I want you to know that you and or your family and or your transition team are in intelligence reports that were spread around the government by the Obama administration. And yet, we get endless doses of this fool Adam Schiff. Adam Schiff is now concerned about the bipartisan nature of the investigation of the House Intelligence Committee. Adam Schiff, who demanded that Jeff Sessions step down. Adam Schiff, who demanded a special prosecutor. Adam Schiff, who has been demanding an independent commission. And the reason is they want to further politicize this so they can keep pointing to it and pointing to it. I told you the day after the election when Trump won, this is exactly the sort of thing they would do. You heard them talking about impeachment, right? Now you hear them talking about criminality, right? Now they've tried to create a scandal, right? And the big issue for 3 weeks is Donald Trump's tweet. Donald Trump's tweet is a non-issue. Everybody knew what he meant, but the media do not care. The same media that talk about a living and breathing Constitution, you can't really count on the words in the text. All of a sudden, every syllable in Donald Trump's tweets are to be taken literally. But his tweet isn't the threat. What has transpired for 8 months is the problem. For 8 months, salami tactics. For 8 months, cherry picking. For 8 months, little leaks here and little leaks here. And then when you call them on it, the fangs come out, the nails come out. They attack. And they lie. And they insinuate. And they suggest. And they throw around terms like conspiracy theories and so forth. The problem is, ladies and gentlemen, we have very, very conniving, weak Republicans. The Democrats, it's one for all and all for one. I'll give you a perfect example of this. John McCain goes on MSNBC last night. Goes on the most liberal cable TV network purposely. Not to call for an investigation of the Obama administration, not because he's concerned that the Trump family, Trump transition, Trump name is in intelligence reports being spread around, not because he's concerned about White House officials and the Obama administration spreading around intelligence information of some sort or another, or that the NSA got more latitude to share intercepted communications 17 days before the end of the Obama administration. No, none of that concerns John McCain. Go to Cut 9, MSNBC last night. Go.
What we need is a select committee. We know that the Russians interfered with our election, and they did not achieve in affecting the outcome, but we know that for sure. We know that there are cyber attacks going on all the time. There are leaks going on all the time. And so what we need to address this whole issue of what the Russians did, how they did it, the impact, and what we do about it, I now believe belongs in the hands of a select committee. What I think the reason why I'm calling for this select committee or a special committee is I think that this back and forth and what the American people have found out so far, that no longer Congress have credibility to handle this alone, and I don't say that lightly.
So Congress doesn't have credibility to handle this alone. So the Democrats, you see, they create these questions, they create these controversies. They turn the facts on their head. They accuse anybody who disagrees with them of a conspiracy. Their mouthpieces, their surrogates in the media do exactly the same thing. And John McCain falls for it, and so do these other Republicans. Rather than stand strong. And what they should be saying now is we have story after story and issue after issue with the prior administration's conduct when it comes to intelligence activity and law enforcement activity. And they should look at it. They should look at what this administration, the Obama administration, did to the media. That is, Fox News, and particularly James Rosen and his parents. They should look at what the administration did through the Justice Department to the Associated Press. Other threats of a New York Times reporter that took place. They should look at what this administration did with an ally, the Prime Minister of Israel, attempting to interfere with that election and surveilling the Prime Minister of Israel aggressively. So they were collecting information also through the back door, of course, on members of Congress and Jewish organizations. They should look at all this. Yes, they should look at the conduct of this administration starting about a year ago during the course of this election, its intelligence activity, its law enforcement activity, going right through the election process into the inauguration. They got newspaper articles with selective leaks, all intended to smear the incoming administration. If in fact there's evidence of collusion or whatever, you don't conduct investigations this way. You don't keep leaking information to the media. If you have the goods on somebody, you keep it quiet. And then you spring it on them and you take effective legal action against them. You don't put it in the pages of the New York Times or the Washington Post or the BBC or the Guardian or McClatchy newspapers or any of the rest of them. You want to keep that information close to your chest until you're ready to spring and act if you're in law enforcement. The American people have a right to know a lot, Mr. McCain. And you're not asking the right questions at all. You want to talk about process. I've yet to hear you talk, Senator McCain, about the final days of the Obama administration expanding the power of the NSA to share globally intercepted personal communications with the government's 16 other intelligence agencies before applying privacy protections. That, Senator McCain, you don't need a select committee for that. That, sir, is the January 12th, 2017 New York Times. Even your staffers should be able to pick that up, sir. Or this one. March 1. Obama administration rushed to preserve intelligence of Russian election hacking. In the Obama administration's last days, Obama administration, White House officials. And yet, you won't hear this on CNN. You won't hear it on MSNBC, NBC, CBS, the rest of them. It's as if that administration never existed. We talk about the NSA and the FBI and the Department of Justice. We talk about intelligence reports. It all comes within the umbrella of the Obama administration. These agencies report. They report up eventually to the President of the United States. But the Praetorian Guard media wants none of it. Trump campaign aides had repeated contacts with Russian intelligence, February 14, New York Times. Okay. Meaning what? Meaning what? We have felonies committed in the leaking of information. Felonies committed. We even have the suggestion by a nitwit, Congressman Castro on the Intel Committee, and other nitwits all over the media, that the information Nunes brought to the White House must have been given to Nunes by the White House. You ever heard anything so insane? You talk about conspiracy theories. The focus is all screwed up. The focus should be on the conduct of these investigations by the executive branch. Who was investigating what? On what pretext? And under what statutory authority? During the course of a presidential campaign, a Democrat administration, a Republican candidate. This is a big deal. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Anyway, Senator, there's a lot of arm twisting going on in the last minutes up till tomorrow when the House is scheduled to have a vote on the Republican plan. And as I'm reading now, there's wheeling and dealing going on. Are you familiar with the wheeling and dealing?
Look, I'm familiar with the fact that people pushing this bill seem determined to get it to pass, even though it's a bad bill, even though it's a bill that doesn't have the votes necessary to pass, not in the House of Representatives and not in the Senate. So while there's arm twisting going on, I'm not quite sure what they're dealing with at this point, because unless or until such time as they're willing to come back to the table and say, let's do what we said we're going to do, let's repeal all of Obamacare, then I don't see this going anywhere. Not anywhere fast, not anywhere soon, not anywhere good. Certainly not anywhere that's going to pass.
They say they're negotiating this EHB rule, which requires that insurance plans have to cover a basic minimum of health care services. You know, it goes on and on and on. And that some of the Freedom Caucus members are saying, well, if we can get that taken care of, we'll be close. What do you think of that?
Closer, perhaps. I don't think that's enough. I mean, I asked the question, why not repeal all the regulations? Why not look at the fact that this bill extends expanded Medicaid? Why not look at the fact that in extending expanded Medicaid, this bill doesn't immediately freeze new enrollment. Why not look at the tax credit, the refundable tax credit, and the fact that it's not limited by payroll taxes paid or some similar metric like that. So look, adding EHB to it, it's not going to fix it. It's not going to fix it to the point I can vote for it. I don't think it's going to fix it to the point where it can pass either house of Congress.
You know, what is it about Republicans? They campaign as free market conservatives, and then when push comes to shove, they abandon it. Isn't what we want are more choices, and that drives down prices and less redistribution of wealth? Isn't that the sort of thing we want, rather than, again, the federal government developing what policies we should have, creating, in essence, new entitlements for states by subsidizing them even further? I mean, I don't get it.
What we want, Mark, are the two F's: federalism and free markets. Federalism and free markets bring about more competition. More competition means more choices. More choices mean quality goes up and cost goes down. It's that simple. That's what we're for as Republicans. That's what we believe in as conservatives. That's what we ought to do in office, especially when we're campaigning and getting elected based on precisely that agenda.
Now, there's a piece in the Washington Examiner by Philip Klein, who's an excellent writer there, and he says that the parliamentarian told you it's possible to push harder on repealing Obamacare regulations. What's that all about?
Okay, so one of the great points of frustration that we as conservatives have had for some time with this bill.
Oops, that wasn't us. He may have hit the button by accident. We'll get him back. In the Washington Examiner piece, Senator Lee says, what I understood her to say, the parliamentarian, is that there's no reason why an Obamacare repeal bill necessarily could not have provisions repealing the health insurance regulations. And he said that in an interview with the Washington Examiner. And he also said the parliamentarian told him it wasn't until very recently, after the unveiling of the House bill, that any Republican even asked her about the possibility of repealing regulations with a simple majority. Now, this goes to my point that I've been mentioning now for several days. I honestly believe that the Republican establishment does not want to repeal the entirety of Obamacare. I think you have Republican governors, among others, Democrats too, who like the expanded Medicaid. So they've already sold out. I believe there's a lot of that going on. The article goes on. With a House vote currently expected tomorrow, Republican leadership is scrambling for votes, trying to stave off a backlash from conservatives that could sink the bill. One of the issues conservatives have raised is that the House bill leaves most of the regulations in place, thus not combating one of the main complaints about Obamacare, its skyrocketing premiums and limited choice. My problem is, why would you take the foundation of Obamacare, the bones, the structure of Obamacare, and build your quote-unquote alternative on that, as opposed to a market system? And Medicaid is going broke. So why so much focus on expanding Medicaid? It just bothers me that one Congress after another tries to get through one Congress after another. And, meaning getting past it, rather than looking down the road 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years. And that's problematic. Now, I want to strongly encourage you, because we have the Levin surge in place. Even though it's late on the East Coast, go ahead and make your calls or send your emails to your member of the House of Representatives. Don't bother with the Senate right now. They're not involved. You're a member of the House of Representatives, and politely, civilly tell them that you certainly hope they're going to vote no on this, certainly as it stands. Now, the Republican leadership and their surrogates and propagandists are running around saying, we promised the American people we would repeal this, but voting for this doesn't repeal Obamacare. We have Senator Lee back. Voting for this bill doesn't repeal Obamacare, does it, Senator?
Well, it repeals some of it, and that's the problem. We need to repeal all of it. We need to take it out root and branch, as we said over and over and over again, over the last 7 years that we would do. That's what we need to be doing. If you repeal only some of it, and you don't get rid of all the regulations, you're going to leave healthcare costs unacceptably high. That's unacceptable.
Well, when I left the airwaves on Friday, I was very impressed with President Trump's comments after the defeat of RhinoCare. He was baited into attacking the conservatives. He refused to do it. He focused the blame where it belonged. But then comes the weekend. And he unleashes a vicious attack against the Freedom Caucus and certain conservative organizations. The president needs to understand something. He's supposed to be the outsider. He's supposed to be the guy who's draining the swamp. So when you lie down with the alligators in the swamp, Mr. President, you get bitten. And that's what happened to you. I want to reiterate my congratulations to the Freedom Caucus. Actually, 18 conservatives out of the rest of them. The others peeled off. All of a sudden, a guy by the name of Tom Poe is famous, a backbencher from Texas, because he quit the Freedom Caucus and attacked the Freedom Caucus. And those kinds of Benedict Arnold types are very, very popular in the liberal media. Just saying. Now, I look at the horizon with the Republicans in Congress and a Republican president, and I have to laugh. They think they have it tough, ladies and gentlemen. You would think this was Abraham Lincoln and the Republican Congress in the Civil War. The way they whine and complain. Oh, we can't get this done, we can't get that done, and the people will be angry with us, and we don't want to cut Medicaid anymore, and if you're 25, you should be on Daddy and Mommy's health care plan, and on and on. We've seen great presidents, we've seen great Congresses. This ain't that. At least yet. Now, in 2010, before there was a Speaker Ryan, before there was a President Trump, despite the fact that Reince Priebus, I believe, was at the RNC as chairman and a loser, we conservatives at the grassroots level in every state rose up in the form of the Tea Party. And we defeated Nancy Pelosi and the liberal Democrats. And we installed the Republicans, who immediately picked John Boehner, another loser, to be Speaker of the House. And we fought and fought and fought to remove Boehner. Another Benedict Arnold. And we succeeded. And then they picked Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan, who is said to be a free market conservative, and yet virtually at every single turn, he turns out not to be. In 2010 and 2012, we tried to take the Democrat Party out of the majority in the Senate and failed. But finally, in 2014, we conservatives did exactly that. And, of course, the Republicans chose Mitch McConnell as the majority leader of the Senate. We had no control over that, and there he sits, useless as ever. While all this is going on, only after that, Donald Trump decides to run for president of the United States. You know the story. He taps into what took place in 2010 and 2012 and 2014. He didn't invent it. He tapped into it. And effectively so. Effectively so. All this talk about nationalism and populism and outsiders and all the rest. The fact of the matter is, this has been and continues to be an ongoing conservative rebellion against the Republican establishment. And the people we send to Washington, whether they be a House member or a Senate member or the President of the United States, has to make a decision. Do they stand with us? Or do they stand with them? This isn't about governing our way to destitution, governing our way to massive debt, governing our way to the poorhouse. This is about restoring the republic. And it takes work, and it takes courage. And apparently the Republican Party's not up to it. So they trashed the 18 men. 18! That's it! In the House of Representatives, who stood up to them. And of course, there were 193 Democrats or so and 6 phony Republicans who also opposed the bill. But they get a pass in the liberal media because they won't be happy. Whether it's the liberal media, the frauds who write at the Wall Street Journal editorial page, some frauds on Fox, frauds on MSNBC and CNN, frauds in the White House. That's right, I said it. Threatening the conservatives that they either vote for this monstrosity or they're on the S list. I believe that was Bannon's phrase, the S list. Oh, we're so scared we're on the S list. Oh, my goodness, we're on the S list. Maybe we won't get invited somewhere. This is about the American people. This is what's right for the American people. For the people who pay the bills. For the people who pay the taxes. For the people these clowns in Washington are supposed to represent. Inside the Beltway, Democrat, Republican, White House, Senate, House, media, all turned their guns on 18 brave men who stood up to them. Now, I want you to listen very, very carefully to Paul Ryan in January 2016. Hat Tip Conservative Review. I'm so proud to be editor-in-chief there. I had nothing to do with this. They dug up. Our buddy Eno and others. Now, I want you to listen to this. This is only 14 months ago. Please listen carefully. Up the volume. Cut one, go.
It's no surprise that someone named Obama vetoed a bill repealing Obamacare. And we will hold a vote to override this veto, taking this process all the way to the end under the Constitution. But here's the thing. The idea that Obamacare is the law of the land for good is a myth. This law will collapse under its own weight, or it will be repealed. Because all those rules and procedures Senate Democrats have used to block us from doing this, that's all history. We have shown now that there is a clear path to repealing Obamacare without 60 votes in the Senate. So next year, if we're sending this bill to a Republican president, it will get signed into law. Obamacare will be gone.
This is exactly what those 18 brave patriots in the Freedom Caucus have said. They have repeated what Paul Ryan said 14 months ago. He said, we have shown now that it is clear, a clear path to repealing Obamacare without 60 votes in the Senate. So next year, if we're sending this bill to a Republican president, it will get signed into law and Obamacare will be gone. Then send it, damn it! But they didn't send it. They didn't send the bill to the president to do exactly what Paul Ryan promised that they would do. All of a sudden, we're told, we can't get rid of all of Obamacare because of the 60-vote filibuster rule in the Senate. He said here, we have shown now that there is a clear path to repealing Obamacare without 60 votes in the Senate. He said it. He said it. If Republicans control everything, we will repeal Obamacare. We can do it without the 60-vote issue in the Senate. Send it to a Republican president, he will sign it into law. Lie after lie, year after year, election after election, and they dare attack the 18 patriots who have stood up to them. 18, just 18. Now we have to govern, they say, ladies and gentlemen. Now they degrade themselves. They embarrass themselves. Now we have to govern. So what was it before when you said these things? Mr. Speaker? Mr. President? House members? Senate members? What did you mean? Was it all a joke? Was it all a fraud? Yes, apparently it was. What a disgrace. And I have to watch, and you do, for 72 hours, of the people who are doing the honorable thing, who are trying to uphold the promises that Speaker Ryan made, that the President made, that they've all made, are under attack. You know why they're under attack? because they are exposing the system for being as corrupt as it is. Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter. Constant bait and switch. Oh, the Senate parliamentarian won't agree. Now, we know that's not true. We've talked about that before. They want to keep the pre-existing condition. They want to keep the Medicaid expansion for all intents and purposes. They want to keep the children, the young adults on the parents' plan. They keep the subsidies. They call them tax credits. What a fraud. A 30% penalty in place of a mandate. Planned Parenthood funding. Planned Parenthood funding is funded another year. I mean, they take it off for a year, and then off after that they can add it back anytime they want. Another phony issue. But still, no across-state line sales. Still, another $1 trillion in costs. Still, your plan will continue to go through the roof. Your deductions will continue to go. Don't tell me about out years, 10 years from now. We all know that's baloney. Now, here's the key. If Barack Obama himself 7 years ago had proposed this exact plan, supported by Ryan, supported by Trump, supported by the vast majority of Republicans in the House, if Barack Obama had proposed this plan 7 years ago, every single Republican would have voted against it and condemned it for the crap that it is, and condemned it as a big, centralized government plan with new entitlements and red tape. They'd be going on and on about how we need to introduce competition and capitalism and private sector involvement. They'd be going on and on about across state lines you need to be able to buy. We've heard it all before. But now, according to the pathetic fools at the Wall Street Journal editorial page, the 18 who stood against it are the Obamacare Republicans. Isn't that clever? Isn't that clever from an editorial page that has been beclowning itself for decades now? Attacking the Tea Party, attacking conservatives. They are the mouthpiece for crony capitalism and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. That's who they are. That's what they are. 17% of the American people supported this bill. A complicated bill. Complicated because it's built on the Obamacare model. This didn't repeal Obamacare. That is another outright lie. It never repealed Obamacare. They could repeal it. Paul Ryan told us 14 months ago that was the plan. They abandoned the plan. They abandoned you. They abandoned their promises. This isn't about purity and getting 100% of what you want. We would take 80% of it, but we're not going to take 2%. All weekend long, starting this evening into Sunday, we're going to hear how this is a grave setback for the President of the United States. You know what, ladies and gentlemen? I'm so sick of the media in this country. This is a grave setback for the American people. First of all, the stupid Republican proposal, which was going to die anyway, and everybody knew it. So we waste weeks on that. The devastating Obamacare bill, which passed and is now law. It's the blob swallowing up health care. The pathetic, low IQ media in this country, which sees everything as a game in which the president must lose. You won't see a single story on any of the cable channels, or the network channels, or the satellite channels. You won't see a single story about what's going on in America's healthcare system today. They will not use this as an opportunity to talk about what a disgrace Obamacare is because they like it. They're the Praetorian Guard media. They think it's a joke. Have you noticed how giddy the media are? The smiles on their pathetic faces. Have you seen it? They think this is great. No, it's not great. You have people suffering out there who cannot afford their health care. And the Democrats don't have an answer. They helped cause it. And the Republicans blew it. Now, Part of the problem here, ladies and gentlemen, is a guy by the name of Gary Cohn, C-O-H-N, a New York liberal Democrat, in my humble opinion. No, nobody's leaked this to me. I've been watching this guy. A Goldman Sachs guy, an egomaniac, a big mouth, and a big lib, pushing the carbon tax and the Paris Agreement and this and that and all the other crap. There's another problem. I'm sorry, it's true. Reince Priebus, working with his Republican friends in Congress, including Paul Ryan. Reince Priebus. The president has around him New York liberals. That is, he's got progressives, he's got populists, nationalists, a rhino. He needs a few conservative capitalists. Some free market capitalists. That would help. It would help, in my opinion. Now, I thought the president's comments today were actually outstanding. And he showed enormous humility. And this guy doesn't give up. I mean, he said, okay, we'll fight another day. In essence, he said, look, events are going to reach a point where this is going to have to be addressed and resolved. And when it reaches that point, I'm here. Mark, that's not leadership. Well, it kind of is, actually. I'm not making a comparison. It's the sort of way that Dwight Eisenhower managed. He said, okay, when things reach a point, they'll be knocking on my door, and then we'll figure things out. But I want you to hear some of this, because many of you were working as these things transpired through the day. Let's start with cut 6. Mr. Producer, go.
Thank you very much. We were very close. It was a very, very tight margin. We had no Democrat support. We had no votes from the Democrats. They weren't going to give us a single vote, so it's a very difficult thing to do. I've been saying for the last year and a half that the best thing we can do, politically speaking, is let Obamacare explode. It is exploding right now. It's many states have big problems. Almost all states have big problems. I was in Tennessee the other day, and they've lost half of their state in terms of an insurer. They have no insurance, and that's happening to many other places. I was in Kentucky the other day, and similar things are happening. So Obamacare is exploding. With no Democrat support, we couldn't quite get there. We're just a very small number of votes short in terms of getting our bill passed. A lot of people don't realize how good our bill was because they were viewing phase 1, but when you add phase 2, which was mostly the signings of Secretary Price, who's behind me, and you add phase 3, which I think we would have gotten, it became a great bill. Premiums would have gone down, and it would have been very stable, it would have been very strong. But that's okay. But we're very, very close, and again, I think what will happen is Obamacare, unfortunately, will explode. It's going to have a very bad year.
Well, people say, well, that's it. That's what he said. Well, he's not a dictator. The bill wasn't passed, and he couldn't sign it. Now, he got behind this bill. I've heard it said, he could have done more. I don't know what else he could have done. I think that was his mistake, getting behind this bill. And that he and his staff, and I wish there was a conservative capitalist, rather than a liberal New York Democrat like this guy, Gary Cohn, or whatever his name is, or, a top conservative economist, and sit down and say to the Republican leadership, no, we want these changes in here. We need to make these changes in here. Instead, you got Ryan with Reince Priebus, you got the liberal Democrat, you got this going on and that going on. But anyway, I thought Trump handled himself, actually, in this speech, exceptionally well. Cut 7, go.
And I think the losers are Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, because now they own Obamacare. They own it, 100% own it. Mm-hmm. And this is not a Republican health care. This is not anything but a Democrat health care. And they have Obamacare for a little while longer until it ceases to exist.
And while we're on this, where are the proposals from Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to fix their Obamacare? Where are the Democrat proposals? I don't mean the lunatic Marxist left like Bernie Sanders. Hey, I know what? Let's not shut up and sit down. Now let's talk briefly, if we can, about this budget. I know it's boring, but it shouldn't be boring. The proposal is a significant increase in defense spending, a significant increase in spending on the Department of Homeland Security, significant increase in spending on the Veterans Administration and so forth. In other words, things the government is supposed to do. National security, domestic security, our veterans, and so forth. Significant cuts at the EPA. Do you know about half of the EPA's budget is grant giving? Did you know that? You may get this idea that they sit there and you got all these environmental experts sitting there and they've got labs and they're checking the air. That's not how this works. They give billions of dollars to nonprofit organizations, most of them left-wing, billions of dollars to universities and colleges to advance their agendas. These universities and colleges and these left-wing groups, they have to make application, and of course they give it mostly to people who share their left-wing agenda. So half, maybe more than half, of the EPA's budget is redistributing monies to their favored third parties. That's pretty damn outrageous. But let's discuss this briefly. Let's discuss briefly what's going on in this country in terms of spending, okay? I've mentioned this before, but let's underscore it today, because what you're not hearing in any of the discussion about the Trump proposed budget is the debt. No charts on the debt are being presented. In February of 2015, Boston University professor of economics, Dr. Lawrence Kotlikoff, testified before the Senate Budget Committee about what he called America's fiscal insolvency and its generational consequences. He flatly stated, quote, "Our country is broke. It's not broke in 75 years or 50 years or 25 years or 10 years. It's broke today. Indeed, it may well be in worse shape than any developed country, including Greece." This is his testimony. He condemned Congress for cooking the books. He said Congress's economically arbitrary decisions as to what to put on and what to keep off the books have not been innocent. Successive Congresses, whether dominated by Republicans or Democrats, have spent the post-war accumulating massive net fiscal obligations, virtually all of which have been kept off the books. So Kotlikoff explained that the real debt picture is far worse than the federal government admits. Now remember, this is 2 years ago. He said the U.S. fiscal gap currently stands at $210 trillion. The size of the U.S. fiscal gap, $210 trillion, is massive, he said. It's 16 times larger than the official U.S. debt, which indicates precisely how useless official debt is for understanding our nation's true fiscal position. This is his testimony. He said in 2013, the fiscal gap stood at $205 trillion. In 2014, it was $210 trillion. Hence, the country's true 2014 deficit. The increase in its fiscal gap was $5 trillion, not $483 billion increase in official debt reported by the CBO. So if in 2017, ladies and gentlemen, our fiscal debt, unfunded liabilities, was $220 trillion, growing at $5 to $7 trillion a year, it's now $220 trillion. Now, Professor Kotlikoff concluded what should be obvious to all. He testified U.S. post-war generational policy is accurately characterized as take as you go. Over the decades, Republican and Democratic Congresses and administrations have taken ever larger amounts of resources from young workers and transferred them to older retirees. The resources taken from the young and given to the old were called, in the main, taxes. Taxes. The young were effectively told, don't worry, we're calling these resources taxes, but when you're old, you'll receive massive transfer payments that more than make up for what you're paying now. Thus, there is a colossal transfer of wealth, not yet created by younger people and future generations, to our generation, ladies and gentlemen, which will doom America's children and grandchildren if left unabated. This is from Plunder and Deceit. Moreover, the nation's increased debt burden will wreak havoc on the economy in very specific ways. Higher interest rates, slower economic growth, weaker job markets, higher taxes, higher inflation rates. The CBO notes that the enormous amount of government securities required to finance debt crowd out investments by individuals and businesses in the private marketplace, including in manufacturing, research, infrastructure, small and large business opportunities. And it goes on. And it goes on. This is the context in which this debate on the federal budget and federal spending should be held, and it is never the context in which it is. Never. The media don't care. The Praetorian Guard media. That's all they're about, advancing the left's agenda. And so they will give you the stories of the people who will suffer, and the people who will this, and the people who will that, as we spend ourselves in a massive bankruptcy and oblivion, or as this professor says we already have. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin on 77.
By the way, breaking news, do we have our Meet the Depressed music? I don't mean to put you on the spot. We could always sing it, you know. There we go. That's right, federal judge. Another federal judge blocks the new Trump travel ban. CNN, a federal judge in Hawaii has blocked President Donald Trump's new travel ban hours before the ban was set to go into effect. This ruling means that travelers from 6 Muslim-majority countries and refugees will be able to travel to the U.S. It's not a matter of 6 Muslim-majority countries. It's a matter of those specific countries. The Trump administration took over a month to rewrite the travel ban order after multiple federal courts blocked its implementation last month. We have, ladies and gentlemen, rogue federal district judges now. We have rogue courts. Rogue. R-O-G-U-E. Rogue. We have judicial anarchy taking place right now, ladies and gentlemen, where judges are seizing plenary authority from the President of the United States to keep this nation safe, to control our borders, and to determine the nature of our immigration in this country. Unlike the previous executive order, the new one removed Iraq from the list of banned countries, exempted those with green cards and visas, and removed a provision arguably that prioritizes certain religious minorities. Despite these changes, U.S. District Court Judge Derek Watson concluded that the new executive order still failed to pass legal muster. It didn't fail to pass any legal muster. It didn't fail to conform with the Constitution of the United States. You have. You have. This judicial tyranny has got to end. And that's exactly what this is. This judge shopping by the ACLU and the other miscreants with law degrees. Looking for liberal judges in Hawaii, in Seattle, in Boston, here, there, everywhere. Then you have these moronic attorneys general in these states, these blue states, who seek to allow people to come into this country who will harm their citizenry. Well, Mark, how do you know? That's the point. That's the point. There is nothing illegal, nothing unconstitutional, nothing racist, nothing bigoted, nothing irrational about what Trump is trying to do. Quite the contrary. And now the judiciary has taken over our immigration rules in this country. Now, of course, they won't touch the sanctuary cities because most of these clowns are in sanctuary cities and have no problem with it whatsoever.
We have to admit, ladies and gentlemen, if we're going to turn this country around, that the progressives have won. The progressives have won. They've taken over the courts for the most part. They own the bureaucracy for the most part. They own the presidency all too often. And they own Congress too. Look at them falling over each other, trying to avoid repealing Obamacare. We have to admit that they have succeeded in order to fight back. And that's exactly what's happened now. A judge rules that this may not pass legal muster. Absolutely pathetic and outrageous. Kill the music, please. Just pathetic. And there's 900 or 1,000 district court judges. Do each one of them get to make a decision? So we have a district court judge in Hawaii who has instituted a stay for the whole nation. For the entire nation. I am telling you that the framers of the Constitution, that the state ratifiers of the Constitution would have had none of this. This judicial tyranny. None of it. Appalling. Absolutely appalling.